I started filming people on the 6 train by accident. It was one of those thermal imaging apps that uses the phone's infrared camera filter, not military grade or anything, but good enough to make people glow in bands of heat in that signature palette. Blood orange core, yellow edges bleeding into blue-black. I downloaded it on a lark during my first fall in New York, scrolling half-drunk on the FDR after another disappointing date. The app saved short looping clips by default, 3 or 4 seconds each, unless you held your finger down. The videos didn't have sound. It was just color and shape, and that smooth, grainy crawl from pixel to pixel, like slow television static with a pulse. I didn't post them anywhere. I used it like a sketchbook. Faces flattened out, bodies reduced to thermal outlines. The anonymity of it must have comforted me. I filmed construction workers asleep against fiberglass insulation near Bleecker. Kids slouched over their phones at 77th Street. Elderly women tucked in coats at Union Square, everyone blurred by heat into the same kind of living murk. It was rote, unobtrusive. No one noticed. It was November when I started noticing a kind of smear in some of the recordings, an edge of heat that didn't belong. This was before I thought anything of it. The app didn't show reflections, not well at least, and yet in certain frames, very briefly, something like a person would appear behind the subject. Not shaped clearly, not a face, not profile or motion. More like a lean silhouette, hunched inward, almost fetal, outlined in the dull orange, meant for body warmth. Only in playback did it show up. I would think, maybe that's someone standing close by, just cropped, strangely in the frame, but there was never anyone there at the moment of filming. I started scanning each clip more closely. I took one on the platform at 14th Street. Some teenage buskers, hoodies up, fake mustaches glued sloppily, to test the angle I thought was causing the bleed. When I reviewed the video, the smear wasn't behind them this time, but low, curled under the metal bench. And it pulsed. It genuinely pulsed, like a living body fighting cold. I deleted and reinstalled the app. That changed nothing. I used a second phone. Same thing. I checked reviews in the App Store, searched for privacy breaches or data mining articles, assumed it was some kind of facial recognition training software buried in terms of service. I still think it might be. But that doesn't explain the change I saw later, which was beyond coding failure. The smudge began to grow day by day, always just in thermal mode, always only during transit, never the parks, not on foot, never during daylight when the city warmed open. Something about the sealed temperature of the train cars, the insulation of subway heat, made it more visible, like the fluorescent overheads bleached away the masking. Eventually, it stopped being stationary. The shape moved between frames now. Not smoothly, it jittered, warped between pixel bands like it couldn't quite hold itself inside the human silhouette. But it moved. The most recent clip I took before I stopped casually filming was at 96th Street, early evening. Only 4 other people in the car, everyone spaced out. I held up the phone as usual, thumbed open the filter, and swept the camera along the horizontal seat line opposite. People glowed normally, colors behaving as they always had. But when I looped the saved clip, maybe 6 seconds, I watched the frame ghost and blur as the heat smear pulled up from the floor and affixed behind a man in a gray coat hunched over his briefcase. You couldn't read it as limbs exactly, but there was a posture, a levered bend at what might be a shoulder. It hunched against his back with a grotesque approximation of care. And as the loop repeated, its head, or what I think was meant to be a head, tipped slightly, like it was listening to his breath. I walked the rest of the way home from the subway that night, 3 miles in cold wind without gloves. Fog had begun to hollow out around the pavement lights, and each one seemed to carry the shape for a moment, like the smear had learned to transpose itself onto light gradients. 3 nights later, I stopped bringing the phone out entirely during my commutes, but the shape didn't vanish. I catch it sometimes in real vision now, normal human vision, which shouldn't be possible. Not often, and never when I'm looking directly. But if someone near me shifts in their seat and the overhead flicker falls just right, I sometimes see, no, sense, that tremor, like air vibrating above hot asphalt, a shimmer in a human outline, where no other person stands behind them. One night I stayed underground too long trying to convince myself I'd never seen any of it. I walked the platforms without boarding, 4 hours from midnight to first light, rotating through lines I could still transfer without going to surface. Starting on the 4 at Grand Central, slipping to the R down at Court Street, then back up the F toward 34th. I wasn't filming anymore. I just couldn't bring myself to go home. And the constant crowding of spaces helped me feel protected. At Murray Hill, around 3:20 a.m., a sanitation crew, boarded with bags of bleach and orange marked mops. I let my head drift down against the smudged Lexan window and listened to their boots trace a half-hearted rhythm over the floor tape. It was only when their reflections staggered in the far end glass, 30 degrees offset from the bulb flare, that I saw a duplicate shadow sweep across the aisle parallel to them, but without any weight to its footsteps. The glass showed 6 men. There were 5. I did not sleep the next night, nor the next. I stopped using the train when I could. But it's not possible to live in the city without the subway, unless you can afford taxis, something I absolutely couldn't. I even considered taking buses cross-borough, doubling my commute, but I didn't know if the shape was bound to metal or simply to routine. Anything repetitive might house it. So I tested it bluntly. I repeated a journey on foot every evening at the same time. Deliberately mundane. East 86th to the Met. Walking past Curb's boathouse and entering through the Temple of Dender Wing, then doubling back. I did it for 10 days. I spent $200 in museum fees over those days. I needed to find some pattern. On day 6, in the glass reflection of the temple's dusky water pool under the dim spotlights, I saw a double heat smear crouched behind my own body, as if it had learned that light behaved just like temperature in enough darkness. My knees buckled, and a museum assistant rushing over offered me water. I blamed vertigo. After that, I stopped running experiments, but people started appearing differently on camera. I mean on other people's devices, strangers on TikTok, YouTube, even street cams. I started watching innocuous videos obsessively, subway prank clips, stolen moment candid shots of dancers, police body cam footage. And in several of those, layering deep in shadow or fuzzed blur, I began to notice an extra movement in the margins. New York is always crowded, so the presence of a figure in the peripheral isn't unusual. But these were like early iterations of what I'd seen. Too still when they should jitter. Too quick when the camera panned. Always crouched, leaning. Always near someone sitting or waiting or slumped in inattention. I found a French video essay about thermal signatures and philosophical presence. Nothing supernatural, just meditations on securitization theory. But they had used some of the same software filters I'd originally used. And around timestamp 1709, there's a pause in the B-roll where the host's outline flickers and something external warms briefly in his shadow. The comments had maybe 3 people mention it out of hundreds. I closed the tab. I haven't sat on public transit since. I walk hours now in snow or rain. I've long since been fired. Sleep comes in stutters. But the shape has adapted. I saw it again, in its strangest form, late one night in Bryant Park. I hadn't meant to be there. I'd been walking west on 42nd, staying under street lamps, when the rain picked up so quickly it felt intentional. I ducked under the glass awning near the carousel to avoid the gust. A man sat across from me on the next bench, barely visible in silhouette. No phone, no umbrella, just hands folded and coat open as if he didn't notice wind. And behind his outline, through the glass reflection of the library's high windows, I saw not a smear this time, but loops of movement, as if the shape were rehearsing how to enter his body like a remembered position it had once held, over and over, an invisible skeleton matching his curvature, folding into alignment like it was trying to become a long-forgotten part of him. Sometimes I see it near children asleep in strollers, or old men nodding off against street lamp poles. Never when they're active. Never when they acknowledge you. It waits only until something inside them stops resisting their shape. And I've learned its signature now, what it leaves behind in the people it shadows. It's not death or illness. It's a condition. Low level, gradual. They lose insight into time. I work shifts now at NYU Hospital, not in medicine. I clean in the psych ward overnight, which is where I started recognizing the others. The patients whose affect is burned out, limbic systems quiet, blank intervals when they think they've spoken but haven't. Some of them speak exactly what I mouthed when I saw it most clearly. Something bent into me. There is no diagnosis for that. There is no scan. There is only affect, tone, posture, how quick you orient toward mirrors. The worst part is I've begun skipping time. I will sit for what feels like minutes, then find my phone logs show hours. At first I thought it just watching, always from behind me, always just in my breath. But it's deeper now. My reflections no longer feel symmetrical. In some mirrored surfaces, subway windows, water puddles, detergent-polished floors, and hospital wings, I find myself looking not from my own eyes, but just offset, a half-inch displaced, like someone else guessed my shape and got close, but not precise. Sometimes I check the convex security mirrors posted near emergency exits. When I tilt my head, the mirrored version doesn't perfectly match me. It lags by almost a third of a breath. I once tried to speak to another former hospital cleaner who left without explanation. I looked up his new address in Harlem, visited under pretense of returning old ID badges. He opened the door 6 inches and cried when he saw me. I wasn't sure he recognized me. He just said very softly, "It likes seated people. It doesn't need us to sin, just to pause." Then he shut the door. I've since stopped trying to fix it. I only track its spread. I see it in Queens, Staten Island, Jersey, even past White Plains. Always the same conditions. Someone alone, seated or slouched, body given over to gravity. That's how it begins. Heat is only a tool. What it really needs is your absence, your yielding. Once it maps you, it begins replicating posture until your body fits what it remembers. Then you forget you were ever not doubled. Tonight I'll ride the R train from DeKalb to Forest Hills without moving, without filming. I just need to see if it still prefers the underground warmth. I want to know if it's changed hosts, if it's still following me, or if I now carry one of its copies. If I see the shape again, more aligned, crisper than before, I'll know which it is. I'll know what's riding with me. And if not, if there's no longer a separate shape behind people's bodies, that means it doesn't need to hide anymore. That means it's wearing us.